2005. The world gathers around their television sets to hear the verdicts in the Michael Jackson molestation trial. The King of Pop's fate hangs in the balance, as the verdicts will determine once and for all the question everyone has had on their minds for years. What is the nature of Michael Jackson's relationships with young children?
45-year-old man having sleepovers with 9-year-old
That is not
boys.
criminal.
The jurors go back into the deliberation room and the waiting game starts.
Michael Jackson is arguably the most iconic entertainer the world has ever seen.
Michael Jackson, at the height of his career, was the most recognizable, most famous person on the entire planet.
And the most scandalous. The media relishes his odd behavior, his constantly changing appearance, and the drug addiction that leads to his death. But for many, Michael Jackson will forever be defined by his bizarre private relationships.
He was a fixture for every tabloid because they couldn't predict the outlandish behaviour. They would never be able to predict that he'd end up marrying Elvis's daughter, have a surrogate for 2 of his children. He would hold his child from a balcony roof.
The trial of the century is the culmination of Michael's unsettling associations, which have plagued him his entire adult life, and all stem from his childhood, a time he continually tries to recreate. At the age of 6, Michael Jackson takes the world stage as the lead singer for the Jackson 5.
I was the editor of Right On Magazine, which was a magazine created because of the phenomenon of the Jackson 5. When the Jackson 5 came out on Motown, they started having a lot of hits.
Who didn't love the Jackson 5? I grew up wanting to be, in the Jackson 5.
He was definitely the focal point in the group. All eyes were on little Michael Jackson.
But the responsibilities of fronting a superstar act come at a cost.
Practice, practice, practice. That's really all the Jackson 5 ever did. They weren't out playing with their friends very often at all. They were inside rehearsing all the time. Their dad wanted them to be sharp. He wanted them to be able to earn money.
What that ended up resulting in for him was it put undue pressure on him. No 7 or 8-year-old should have to wonder what role they play in the family's finances.
As the most talented of the group, young Michael bears the brunt of the financial burden and his father's iron fist.
We were nervous rehearsing because he sat in the chair and he had this bell in his hand. And if you didn't do it the right way, he would tear you up, really get you.
Joe Jackson was a failed musician. He was working the night shift as a crane operator at a steel mill. But he still maintained this sort of dream of success in music. He kind of abandoned it for himself, but he saw that his sons had some ability. He drove them relentlessly.
If there had not been a Joe Jackson, there would not be a Michael Jackson or any other Jackson. You have to have that discipline.
But some see Joe Jackson's discipline as the root of Michael's stunted growth and troubled relationships later in life.
He would lose his temper. I just remember hearing my mother scream, "Joe, you're gonna kill him, you're gonna kill him." I was scared, so scared that I would regurgitate.
He was sadistic and selfish and greedy. And he wounded all of his children, but especially the most sensitive one, deeply. When he gave him a beating with a belt, he used the buckle end.
Our parents are supposed to be people that love us and that care for us and show us a model of unconditional love. Instead, his father showed him terror and fear.
So I think that he grew up this sort of fearful child that he never stopped being.
Michael Jackson's distorted view of love develops at home, but becomes even more confusing for the child prodigy when the Jackson 5 hits the road.
Their first gigs were in strip clubs. So Michael is 6 years old, standing in the wings, watching some woman strip totally and then throw her underwear out into the crowd and passing around and sniffing them. And he's watching this, unable to comprehend it.
His brothers enjoyed all these girls running after them, and the fans would find their way into the hotel rooms and they'd hide in the closets.
He's sharing rooms with his brothers, and they're having sex with the groupies basically next to him in bed. He actually would talk to some of these groupies and try to get them not to sleep with his brothers, and with tears in his eyes, don't do this to yourself. He's prepubescent, being bombarded with this kind of raw sexuality, and so he recoiled from that and began developing a very idealized, romanticized view of sex, but it was also kind of an antiseptic view of sex.
Michael Jackson's early exposure to adult situations leads him to long for a more normal childhood.
I don't think he felt like he had anybody who understood him. He didn't hang out with anybody his own age. He hung out with only people older than him. And he was asked to behave like somebody who was older.
Michael's most poignant memory was when he was in the studio. The windows happened to face out on a playground, and he would see the kids on the merry-go-round and just think, oh, if I could only have that life.
As Michael grows into an adult, he desperately tries to relive the childhood his father forced him to abandon.
There was this sense that he had got kind of stunted emotionally, psychologically, and that somehow he just got trapped. He forever held on to that boyhood. It was like he never wanted to grow up and become a man in any way.
Not wanting to become a man means not dating. And Michael's lack of a female significant other creates media speculation about his sexuality.
People had been whispering about Michael anyway, because there was a delicacy to the way he presented himself. The romance with Tatum O'Neal, was supposed to combat that.
Michael Jackson meets actress Tatum O'Neal in the late 70s, when he is 17 and she is 12. In order to project the image of a normal man, Michael begins calling her his girlfriend. But some question the validity of his claims.
My first girlfriend was Tatum O'Neal, but I don't think I was ready for some of the things she was talking about. I was pretty naive, I'm not joking.
Word really got out because of this party at Rod Stewart's house where reportedly Tatum O'Neal tried to get Michael into bed, and Michael fled. And it was a public scene. He left the house in tears, and a lot of people saw it, wondered, what does that mean?
Sometimes he seemed asexual, and then other times he was very interested in girls. One day I came over to his home, and he said, I want to show you some photos of someone. This is the most beautiful girl in the whole world. It turned out to be Brooke Shields. And she was absolutely stunning. Michael started collecting photos of her, and eventually the two became friends.
But when Brooke accompanies Michael to the Grammy Awards in 1984, it creates a media scandal for all the wrong reasons. The King of Pop seems more interested in someone else.
At the Grammy Awards, he would go with her, but he'd have Emmanuel Lewis, the Webster kid, sitting on his lap. I think it was fairly obvious by then to everybody that the whole thing with Brooke Shields was, a friendship at best and not a romantic relationship.
I was on a ski trip with Brooke Shields years after the famous dates that he went on with Brooke. She said my mother and his manager put that together. So I think all of those supposed affairs with Tatum O'Neal and with Brooke Shields were all for show.
Michael Jackson continues his relationships with women, at least in the public eye.
Showing up at the 1991 Academy Awards with Madonna on his arm. What would she be doing with Michael Jackson? Here are the two biggest publicity whores on the planet.
But privately, he prefers to spend his time with children.
Michael Jackson enjoyed the company of children more than adults because he felt the children would not judge him.
Part of him remained a child, and I don't think he had a problem with that.
He proceeded to turn his entire adult life
into a life of a child. I just think he was going back and trying to get the thing that he wanted, which was to be a kid.
At the time, a lot of people saw it as kind of cute and charming, but an indication that he thought of himself as a child in some ways. And then it started to turn a lot more darkly when allegations of molestation were made.